We've got well, I think the whole talk's been interesting the whole day, and we've got many more interesting speakers lined up. So I hope none of you have decided to leave early, because right through to the end we've got very, very interesting topics and excellent speakers. The next speaker is someone I've done quite a lot of work with in lobbying for drug law reform, and that's Shaun Shelly. Shaun studied at the University of Stellenbosch in the Department of Psychiatry, and he's currently improving on his academic qualifications by studying an MPhil at the University of Cape Town. And Shaun's done a hell of a lot of stuff, and he does more than 10 men, so I'm not going to read all his thing, but he is driving the drug reform process in South Africa. He is the guy that does everything, knows everybody, and knows what to say to whom. So everything he says to you is of a lot of value. I don't know how many jobs he does at once, but he's working at UCT. He's involved in, and this is mainly with addiction. His studies are mainly to do with the addictions in the Department of Psychiatry. But in the meantime, he's involved in a lot of projects. One of the most interesting, which hopefully he'll tell you about, is with Pretoria University. So he shuttles back and forth from Cape Town and Pretoria, where they're doing a community-based, the first of its kind in the world, which is tied up with community-based projects dealing with addiction in the context of the community, rather than isolating it. Very interesting. So Shaun's an absolute dynamo, and just hold on to your seats, because here we go. Please welcome Shaun Shelly.
Good afternoon. Keith, you're far too kind. Not much of that's true. Okay, that's the last time I'm looking up there. I just wanted to check that I was on the right screen. So I'm actually quite nervous for once, because I've just come off the back of the South African Drug Policy Week in Cape Town, where I was shunting everybody else around and didn't have much time to think. And down there, I knew my audience. Here, I don't really know my audience. It's not people that I've seen a list of your names and that. And I must say that Myrtle's a pretty brave person, and so is Jules. Very brave people, but they're particularly brave for inviting me to stand here, because they know what I've had to say about the cannabis lobby in the past, okay? Which is not always 100% positive. A lot of it is positive, but I have some criticisms, okay? Because when people come to me and say, legalize cannabis, I go, and heroin. They say, legalize cannabis and methamphetamine. I'm the person who says, decriminalize all drug possession. I'm the person who says, when somebody says to me, oh, but it's natural, I say, so's a poppy. All right? I know the processes that go through. And when somebody says cannabis is safe, I say, for most people, but not for everybody. And when they say methamphetamine is dangerous, I said for a lot of people, but for some people, it's a lifesaver. And the same with heroin. So I don't come from one angle. I'm not an expert on cannabis by any manner of means. If they were writing a cannabis textbook, I'd be the last person to write it. Strangely enough, I've tried almost every drug in the universe. Cannabis is not one of my favorites. I'm sorry, I tried. But before we start fully, I want to say that these are particularly special days for me. Now this is a list of people that I put up at a presentation in Cape Town 18 months ago. And I said, these are my heroes. Andrew Tatarsky, who's the founder of harm reduction psychotherapy. Mark Willenbring, who used to be the head of research at the NIAAA, one of the finest clinicians in the world. Carl Hart, who a lot of you will know. Julian Buchanan, who started off as a social worker in the poorest areas of Liverpool and then worked in Marx's clinic, delivering as a social worker, prescribing injectable methadone and diamorphine, and now has just retired as a criminologist. Mark Lewis, my good friend, who wrote The Biology of Desire, which I was privileged enough to contribute to. We've just written a fantastic paper, I think, for Aon. Mike Ashton, who has created this incredible resource called the Drug and Alcohol Findings. Ethan Nadelman and Professor David Nutt. And the amazing thing is that I've actually met all of these people, except for Mark Willenbring. I correspond with him quite regularly though, and I've established some sort of connection with them. So this for me is my dream. But these are not my real heroes. Let me tell you about the people that I work with. I work with essentially indigent, street-dwelling, injecting heroin users. Those are the people I work with most of the time. And I work in HIV prevention. Prior to that, I worked with a forensic population of gang members who were using methamphetamine in Lavender Hill in the Western Cape. I work with transgendered people and sex workers. The most vulnerable of vulnerable people, but the people with the most agency in some areas of their lives that I've ever seen in my life. They are victims of their past, but they are victims of their future and their current situation, despite what people might say. So on those photos there, on the one side, you've got one of our outreach workers walking down a set of railway tracks to go under the bridge, as the Red Hot Chili Peppers song say, because even in South Africa, under the bridge is where they shoot up. And there is Tara, a resus paramedic, with her hands on her head, exasperated, because the police have just arrived and are confiscating needle and syringes from the people there, despite orders not to do so. And this is the Support Don't Punish football team, made up entirely of street-dwelling people. And a lot of these people in this photo will or have already become staff members. And everybody goes, oh, when did they stop using drugs? And most of them haven't. And you know what? They're the top performing team in the country. They have 20 homeless, actually they're not homeless, street-dwelling, heroin-dependent injectors who are HIV positive, who are virally suppressed, and they don't force them to take their medication. They just see them regularly and they treat them like human beings. And you know what? It's an amazing thing. People who use drugs dependently are actually able to take drugs. But the medical profession often doesn't recognize that. And so if you've got TB and you're an illicit drug user, and I use the term illicit, you know, it's an arbitrary term, we know that, but I'm talking from the legal point of view. If they're using an illicit drug, they can't get their dose delivered to their house. They don't get maintenance therapy when they come into the hospital. And so they abscond, because doctors can't say to them, hey, before you take your morning shot, take your TB meds. And so we've got MDR and XDR TB in the Western Cape on the rise. So what's this got to do with drug policy? Quite a lot, actually. So for me, it's really interesting. Mark Lewis and I, we describe these things as fractals. They're like fractals. You've got it on a micro level, sort of a medium level, and a macro level. And it's the same thing. It's these cycles that are going on all the time. And Zinberg, who's somebody that I really respect his work. The book Drug Set and Setting is one of my essential reads. Zinberg says that drugs are not just about pharmacology. It's about the drug, the set, and the setting. And if you doubt that, there's a very good example going on in South Africa at the moment, and that's that thing in Tshwane called Bluetooth. You know what it is? Okay, so what happens is, and it's not as common as people will have you make out, we see 2,600 injecting heroin users in the city of Tshwane, and we'd never seen it until a Tanzanian guy came out of a prison, and he'd done it in the prison, and then the press got hold of it and told everybody they get a fantastic high out of it. And what it is one heroin user who's got heroin will take his shot of heroin, he will then extract some blood, and he will then put it into his friend's vein. And the story is, you get a fantastic high. The reality is, there is no high whatsoever. It is purely placebo effect. All right? Can't be anything else. It's all pain, zero gain. And that's the message we need to get out there. But the mindset is an incredibly strong thing. Drug expectation is a very strong thing. We learn to use drugs based on our expectations of them. And the setting that we take drugs in is also very important. So you can take a person who's heroin dependent, they inject the same dose every single day, put them in a different environment, in a stressful situation, and they start experiencing the symptoms of a drug poisoning. Okay, setting is important. But not only on a small or micro level, on a big level. Our policy creates the mindset, not only of the individual, but of the people around them, and it creates the setting. And if your policy is wrong, if your setting is wrong, you turn drugs which don't have to be lethal, lethal. You make drugs which don't have to be dangerous, dangerous. So let's have a look at some of the examples of this. So what does our policy world do? So here's some examples. Okay, drugs, the drug part of it, you can look at purity, availability, the concentration of the drug, whether setting, whether it's criminalized or not, whether you're using socially or alone, whether the drug is accepted or not. In the mindset, are you using as an act of rebellion? You know, these poor people, if there's legal regulation, what they're going to do? Climb mountains or something terrible like that. Anyway, there's expectation. All right, I've spoken about the Bluetooth. And then there's this access to health, which just isn't there. And so our policies are leading to lower levels of purity. The availability isn't changing, no matter how harsh the policy is, no matter how much policing we do, it's not changing. The concentration is increasing because it's much easier to carry a small piece in your hand, or put it, as somebody said, in your jeans. I wonder if they'll ever splice drugs into our jeans. That'll be interesting. David, project for you. And of course this leads to things like synthetics. Okay? And synthetics carry a really interesting array of problems when acting as pro-drugs and things like that. It's very interesting. But the setting, you're using in unsafe areas, you're in contact with crime, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because you're told you use once, you'll never stop. Once an addict, always an addict, which is just not true. There's no data to support that. In fact, the data says exactly the opposite. There's the feeling that you are a criminal, and once I've been criminalized, you know what, I'll just take this opportunity. As Neil Wood says, crime is not about people going out to commit crime, it's about opportunity often. And there still remains no access to health. Now, people might say, oh, well, you know, Shaun, you're talking rubbish here. But I'm not the only one who says this. If we look at other health issues, and we look at, this is a diagram of the World Health Organization. It's difficult to read. You don't have to read it up here. But all I'm showing, if this was a university class, I'd be talking about how these things are not unique to the drug world. I loved the time I heard Myrtle on the radio, and John Matham asked her, he said, you know, but doesn't cannabis make the brain change? She said, I sincerely hoped so. Because if it didn't make the brain change, it wouldn't do anything. You know, Mark Lewis and I, we always have this argument with with the people from the other camp, who say, oh, this thing changes your brain. Well, I would hope it does. It does. It has to change your brain. Your behavior changes, your brain changes in some way. Okay? And what we've had is we've had this incredibly binary approach. And so now in the United States that you've got this sudden heroin overdose or opioid overdose epidemic, everybody's saying, oh, no, we must go to a medical model. The white guys get medical treatment, the black guys go to jail. This binary approach. That's the way it's worked all along. And there was a guy the other day who wrote this very good article, except for one thing. He said, we as black people in the United States who haven't been getting treatment, who've been getting incarceration, we want that treatment as well. But he hasn't thought carefully about that. Because in actual fact, the treatment and the incarceration are two sides of the same coin often. The pathologization of the people who use drugs is the same, it's the same outcome. Except they've worked out now they can charge you to be a patient, they can't charge you to be a prisoner. And this is not knocking the medical profession, because there are a lot of really caring and concerned people out there. But I have to ask myself, why, if this is such a big problem, do we not have diamorphine being prescribed in the United States? For those that don't know, diamorphine is pharmaceutical heroin, and it's got a better safety profile in some instances than methadone. Okay? It's been used for a long time with very good data. Why do we not have one single, fully evidence-based methadone program in the United States, low threshold methadone program? We don't have them. The federal regulations prevent that. You have to get a certain number of take-home doses initially. You have to engage in psychosocial services, although most people by that stage, attempt number 20, don't really want to be singing Kumbaya. They just want their methadone and to go out and be able to work and to be able to take a dose home. And everybody goes, oh, diversion. There's diversion not because they want to get high, it's because they're helping their partners who are in a job. And if there's diversion, you just make sure you've got 100% coverage. So in the Western Cape, we've got this one. Have you seen this? This is Patricia DeLille. She says, my name's Patricia DeLille. And you said don't look back there, but this is to point there. Can I look back? This is, my name is Patricia DeLille and I have a drug problem. She says I don't use them. I crossed that out because that's not true. Of course she does. She drinks alcohol. She uses drugs. And this is a young man that I know. He's got this, he did this beautiful interview, and in it he said, I wish I could quit heroin, but having a job wouldn't be bad either. The interesting thing is that that Pretoria team I told you about, the Tshwane team, they're all injecting heroin users, and they came into the program. What happens is when you give them a job without an expectation of them quitting, they start slowing down on their drug use. And a lot of them have stopped. Some of them are on OST, some of them aren't on anything, some of them have just stopped, some of them are using cannabis because they find it a great form of harm reduction. And if we've got an opioid problem, why aren't we using cannabis as a harm reduction technique? Because we know that a lot of people benefit from it, right? And this guy, he leads, as I say there, it's shitty in my town, he leads a shitty life, okay? And his drugs make his life tolerable forever, which might not be very long for him. We accept that. But for today, it makes his life better. We do not have a drug problem, we've got a drug solution. And we've got even more of a drug policy problem. And so we've got young children in the Cape Flats, where I come from, who go to school and the police arrive at school and they search them and they smell them with dogs and they find cannabis on them, and if that's not apartheid-style policing, I don't know what is. And they're terrified, and one kid gets caught out in the whole school and he gets suspended for 14 days. And they were saying there's this epidemic of methamphetamine in the Western Cape. They tested the school children, nothing. Except when they'd been suspended within 2 weeks, a lot of them were testing positive for methamphetamine. How can you do that? How can you take away the very thing that the person needs and expect them not to progress down the line of drug use? So, some young guy gets caught because he doesn't have a house in Bishop's Court where he can smoke in the back garden, and the police van's driving past, and they see him, and they catch him, and he goes to jail. He's too scared to phone his parents, and he's in the holding cell, so he doesn't phone home. He can't give an address, so they hold him for 7 days. And he goes into Pollsmoor, awaiting trial, and it's 26, 27, 28. Channel this for us. And then he can never get a job, can't even get a job, call center, and recidivism becomes inevitable. This is what our current drug policies are doing. So let's have a look at what types of drug policies there are as an alternative. And I find this quite interesting. This is from the IDPC. I forgot to reference it down here. Jamie will forgive me, but this is an IDPC sign. And what it does is it looks at there's some de facto sort of results. So it's not actually in law, but it's a de facto result. Okay, and so we've got these things like no sanction whatsoever in the Netherlands. So I was quite surprised. I went over to the Netherlands to have a look at what their systems were. They don't have injecting heroin users anymore there because they're an aging population, average age 38. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the main reasons was they gave everybody housing. Okay, it works. Look at the housing first data. Then, in the United States, we've got these diversion programs. I sat with Carl Hart at the back of a session, and they were talking about LEAD, which is Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And they were doing the study on it, and they said, okay, you've got green days and you've got red days. On the green day, when the police officer finds an habitual criminal, all right, yeah, I'm going to go over time a little bit. I'll be as quick as I can. So they say, on the green day, when this officer comes across this guy, what does he do? He says to him, here's a list of services we have. Which service would you like, if you would like any of them? If you don't want one, you don't have to take them. And it's housing and seeing a social worker, getting a grant. And that's what he gets. On a red day, he gets arrested, processed, goes to jail, goes to court. Who do you think does better? The green day, of course. But do you need science to prove that compassion works? It's crazy that we're even testing that. In a city which has only got a 6% black population, and yet more than 50% of the arrests are black males. Something's out of kilter. So then there's the criminal justice sort of approach with diversion, and this is drug courts. Drug courts do not work. They are punitive. They should not exist. Then we've got criminal justice sort of system where they decide whether or not you're a dealer or not. That's like in Germany. They've got an administrative decision where they decide, oh, should you be punished or not? And then they've got police discretion. Now, I'm sorry, these are listed as decriminalization. In my mind, that's not decriminalization. Okay, you still, even in Portugal, you can undergo a sanction and you have to go and sit in front of somebody. And the people in Portugal tell me, the people I've spoken to are actually on the ground, tell me that it depends which district you're in. And sometimes you can get multiple fines, and if you're living on the street, a €50 fine is quite a lot of money. And then we've got Uruguay, which we've heard a lot about. A girl has informed me quite a bit about it, and we've got this legal regulation going on there, and we've got that in some states in the United States. And so my question is, where are we going as South Africa? And I just want to show you a few figures. Simon Howell and I are busy doing an analysis of this. I haven't cited the original source information because I don't want everybody running off and stealing our paper, but this is coming out later this year. And so this is just some totals on offenders by province incarcerated on primary cannabis-related offences. All right? And in the Western Cape, 1,632, KwaZulu-Natal, 1,129, and you can see, and they come right down to 79 in the Northern Cape. Now, those figures, I guarantee you one thing, they're going to go up by between 23 and 25% next year. How do I know that? Because the police quota at station level must be increased by 23 to 25% next year in every single station. And last year, when the quota was 14%, guess how much those figures climbed by? 14%. This is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. And everybody goes, oh, we're getting more and more drug-related crime. And if drugs were the big problem in our communities, why aren't we getting other crimes climbing through the roof? We're not. Have a look at the stats. Have a look at the latest stats. They are stable and coming down. But not more people aren't necessarily using drugs. Just more people are being arrested for it. You know, in Khayelitsha, the poor station commander there, who I won't tell you which one it is because he'll get into a lot of trouble, what he does is he does catch and release. Okay? He brings them in so he can get his targets. And what happens is, because he's actually trying to do the best he can, he gets somebody in there to do a little bit of motivational interviewing and a brief intervention with them, and then he releases them after an hour. He meets his quota, and he hopes that he's making a positive difference in somebody's life. Here we've got the figures of national total incarcerations, national cannabis incarcerations. So 150,000 in 2012 to 2013, or 157,000 in 2014 to 15. The cannabis, 5,660. National drug-related arrests, 266,902. Total of cannabis, 2.12%. Now, that's frightening because we've actually got de facto decriminalization on cannabis, but none of the advantages of it. All the disadvantages, because people are still being arrested for it and having to pay administrative fines, and an administrative fine on a Friday night means a record for the rest of your life. So we're spending about 70 million rand a year just on the cannabis people who are in jail for something that is really benign. That is shocking. What would the options look like? Okay, and unfortunately this format has gone out. That's what happens when you don't decriminalize now. And this cop's saying, I'll go and do some real work, but I'll miss the ATMs. Now, just to let you know that in one of the research papers that Dr. Howe was doing, the police refer to people who use drugs as ATMs and low-level dealers as spaza shops. Why? Not rocket science. We can decriminalize now. It's not impossible. Okay? We can see cannabis as a medication now. Now, I want to stress one thing. These are two totally different debates. The medical issues. How on earth do we live in a world where there's possibly a substance that can make people's lives better and we are not prepared to investigate it? When we are prepared to put chemotherapy there. And it's because the judges of our morality don't mind us feeling fine, but they don't want us feeling any better. And you know what? Some people just do better on heroin. Get the hell over it. These are friends of mine that are dying because of this. So, what would happen if we decriminalized? All right? The concentration would change. We'd probably get less synthetics. People would believe that they're not a criminal. They'd be able to talk about it. People would be retained in their homes. This is just with decrim, okay? They'd get better access to health, one would hope. All right? And let me tell you something. Working with the people I work with, the number one finding from the ethnographic study to evaluate the project, which was done totally independently, was because these people treat me with respect, I feel human again for the first time in my life. And these guys are getting jobs, they are getting better. They are looking after themselves. And do you know why everybody dies from drugs in South Africa? It's not from drug poisonings. There are very few of those actually. It's from things like AIDS-related complications, tuberculosis-related complications, sepsis from injecting, endocarditis, and hepatitis C. In the one sample at one specific clinic, the opportunistic sampling of people walking in there, 90% hepatitis. And those are all things that can be presented. And you know what the data says? The data says these people will resolve these issues at some time in their life if they live. And we're not giving them that opportunity. So, decriminalize now. Yay, but it's not enough. So I say legal regulation, but I add one proviso, that very South African term, just now. And I'll explain why I'm saying that. Raquel, we can argue about this later. And I just want to point out one other thing, and this is thanks to JP van Niekerk. Bootleggers and Baptists often have the same agenda. Okay? People who want drugs illegal are the moralists and the criminals. All right? And there's somebody else that wants this legal regulation to come in, and that's big business. And big business is going to use the policing methods we've got today, and they're going to use the over-pathologization to control it. So we are going to get certain populations who can't access drugs. Now let me give you a very personal example. Say you've got supreme ADD, okay? And you naturally move towards the stimulants. We know that they work. Methylphenidate, Adderall, modafinil for some people, though the evidence is not so strong there. So, you can go to a psychiatrist once a month because it's a Schedule 6 medication that you have to get a prescription once a month. You can't get it any more frequently. 900 Rand a shot. You get your prescription, you go to the pharmacist, you have to wait in a queue for hours, you get it, it costs you around about 1,000 Rand a month, or you can make one phone call and 200 Rand later you can have a gram of methamphetamine. It's pretty tempting. And big business will make all drugs like that if we are not careful. We need to think about this very carefully. And so while in the Eastern Cape, at the moment we've got once a year that chopper flying over, flying glyphosate, which by the way has been termed probably carcinogenic by the World Health Organization last year, 2 little helicopters coming along. If it was big business, we would have Vietnam, you know, that apocalypse now kind of thing, you know, the helicopters coming over there in their droves. And let me tell you that low-level drug dealers are essential to township economies in South Africa, whether you like it or not. And these people are not criminals, they are people who have never had an opportunity in their life. Not all of them are gang affiliated. We've done a study in Cape Town at the moment, which is going to be published later. They are not all gang affiliated. And let me tell you, they're not all Nigerian either. In Bellville in Cape Town, 2.3% of the rest are Nigerian nationals, the rest are all local people. We must stop buying into this rubbish. So what is the impact on communities? Because I hear everybody say, oh, you know, it's terrible. What you're proposing is going to cause death and mayhem. No, it's not. We've already got death and mayhem. We've got doors being kicked in by the police. We've got people being criminalized at the age of 15. And if we don't stop doing it, we are guaranteeing a future of drug use where drug use is the most important thing in that person's life. And so we've got to think about this creatively. We've got to come up with South African solutions, and I know I'm out of time. So I wanted you to remember with the taxi industry, we had this huge illegal taxi industry. And where did we go? We went and started consulting with the taxi drivers and bringing them into the industry. Didn't necessarily work out perfectly, because big business came in and didn't create an equal platform. 25% every time you drive an Uber goes to Uber internationally, and we've got taxi wars at the moment. But we are not going to miraculously sit in this room and come up with a solution, because the wrong people are in this room. We are not speaking to people on the ground. And I'm pleased to announce that yesterday the South African Network of People Who Use Drugs was formulated, and we need to speak to those people. They are the people who should be informing policy, because they are the people most affected. And despite the failures of the CDA, the one thing they did this year was they conducted workshops with the most affected by their drug policies, and they were shocked to see how these people were living. That report is available to be online in the next couple of days at sadrugpolicyweek.com. Sorry, Myrtle, I didn't mean to plug that there, but yeah, we'll actually supply it to Myrtle. She can decide whether to put it onto her site. So how do we do this? And I think we're going to have to follow a research type of model. So something like a participatory action research model, which is what we've done with OST in South Africa. We've gone to 3 different sites. We've done a demonstration project. We've tried to match it as closely as possible to what eventually the thing will look like. And we've got to try what works. But then you can adjust it as you go along, okay? We can't just come in with one act of legislation. And we've got the police agreeing in certain areas to look at things like safe injecting facilities and those kind of things. Because the police on the ground, let me tell you, they actually know what's going on, a lot of them. All right. And just never forget that you do for me without me. You do to me. Nothing for us without us. We need to consult. And the data's great, but we need stories, we need anecdotes, and we need anecdotes which go beyond the narrative of once I was an idiot, then I stopped using drugs and I stopped being an idiot and now I'm wonderful. We need the real stories, okay? Because most of those stories are very good adverts for the pervasive nature of personality disorders, Ask Russell brand. So, even when the data is sound, always have a few good anecdotes available that support your data. Numbers feed the intellect, but stories grow the heart. That's why it's easier to get kids to listen to stories than maths, even if the stories are made up. And remember, most of the stories about drugs are made up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shaun. Thank you. Well, Shaun is, if anyone asks me, who's got street cred in this country to do with drugs? It's Shaun. Who's got academic cred? Shaun. He's got the ideal combination. So thanks, Shaun.